Hello and welcome to the Neurodivergence and Mental Health podcast. My name is Sally Nilsson and I'm a psychotherapist, published author, public speaker and mum. I discovered my autism and ADHD aged 56 in March 2021, and having rewritten my life story, I'm on a quest to advocate for neurodivergent community. I hope you enjoy listening to my incredible guests sharing their experiences of autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, Tourette's and OCD. We talk about growing up, education, work and personal stories, and how mental health has played its part in shaping lives. Our conversations cover spectrums, traits, challenges, acceptance and successes. So sit back, relax and find out what it means to feel, think and be different in a neurotypical world. Hello, Madge, and thank you very much for taking part in the Neurodivergence and Mental Health podcast. And as you know, we're just having a chat. It's like we're meeting for a coffee. And, you know, I've gone round your different social media platforms and listened to podcasts with you on it. And, you know, read up about you really and your Facebook page. And you dip your toes into so many different things and you've got lots of lovely interests. So I'm really going to enjoy this podcast because there's lots to talk about. So I'd like to ask you, if I may, just to introduce yourself, and really it's basically just your name, roughly where you live, and briefly what you do as far as work and your interest in neurodivergence is concerned. It's a bit about what is your neurodivergence as well, please. And over to you, Madge.
Thanks, Sally. What a lovely introduction. So I'm super excited to be here. I'm a big fan of your podcast already, and I know some of your previous guests, some of them are friends of mine, so that's where I heard about you from. So yeah, my name's Madge Woollard. I live in Sheffield with my wife Jo, and for my work I'm a self-employed music teacher. I teach piano and keyboard privately and in school, and that's in fact the only job I've ever done since leaving uni, which is about 28 years ago now. So I've been a long time self-employed, running my own business. I was diagnosed autistic in 2016 at the age of 44, so late diagnosed, and yeah.
Fantastic, brilliant. And we will talk about this a little bit more, but I was so interested, you went to, well, we will talk about this more, but you know, as you were at Cambridge, and it was, yeah, the organ. And for me, you know, as soon as I go into a beautiful church like Ely Cathedral or any of these lovely cathedrals, and I see those pipes, you know, and listen to them, it's amazing. And then you get the other end of the other end where you're going to a tiny little church and they're completely out of tune, and it's absolutely amazing. So we'll come back to that. So thank you so much for telling me that. And so within autism, do you have any other co-occurring conditions that go with your autism?
Not as far as I know at all, no. I think I'm quite unusual for an autistic female, though in fact I do identify as non-binary. I might talk a bit more about that later, that I actually feel I fall in between male and female. But I'm she, her pronouns. You can call me she, her, or any pronouns. I don't really mind.
I get so confused, so thank you very much for that.
But yeah, no other neurodivergent conditions as far as I know.
Thank you. So you're a lovely, pure, happy, lovely autist, and that is wonderful. And yes, we absolutely will talk about you and lovely Jo later. So tell me all about that. So thank you very much for that. So I do like to ask my guests, because this is such an important part of our journey, and my journey. You know, I was only diagnosed at age 56 in March 2021. So I'm a newbie, and it was very difficult. And in my previous podcast I mentioned this. I'm not going to talk about it today because I want to talk to you about it, but I would like to ask you, Madge, can you just tell me a little bit about your assessment and diagnosis journey? Was it straightforward or difficult? And how is your life now that you're diagnosed, specifically around your mental well-being?
Right, so when I first suspected I was autistic, it was my wife Jo who said, "Oh, I think you might be. Why don't you go and get this checked out?" So I went to the GP, and she said, "Oh, don't be silly. You're in a good job, good relationship. If you're autistic, why do you even need to know that?"
Oh,
and
no.
I said, "Excuse me, if I am, I have a right to know."
Yes.
So I did eventually get her to refer me onto the Sheffield Autism Assessment Service. And then I waited a full 12 months. It's longer than that now, but at that time it was, well, I waited 12 months, and then 9:30 one morning, I got a phone call saying, "We've had a cancellation at 10 o'clock. Do you want to come on down?" So with no preparation or anything, I went for my first appointment, and I only had an hour that day because then I had to go on to school to work. So I had to have the appointment in 2 stages. So I went back 6 weeks later. And she said fairly near the beginning, "I'm absolutely certain you're autistic. You tick all the boxes." And I was flabbergasted at that, because I thought I had a few traits, but I had no idea that they diagnosed me so quickly.
Incredible.
So, but what she said to me was, "I've never met anyone who's managed it so well." And that was fantastic affirmation to have. That made me feel really positive.
And it was actually, it's very nice to have, for her to have said right at the very beginning. I can more or less say right at the very beginning that I'm almost 100% sure you are, because I had to wait nearly 2 hours before my fantastic Sarah Hendricks, who I absolutely think is amazing, before she gave me my diagnosis right at the very end. So it's in your head the whole interview. What's she going to say? What's she going to say? Oh, it's all very terrifying. So that's lovely. So, you know, how did you feel afterwards, and how, you know, what did it do for you getting that diagnosis?
Well, straight afterwards, I kind of shut down, because it is such a lot to process. And for about the best part of the next 2 weeks afterwards, I just went to bed and just felt very tired, because I just didn't know how to react. But then I got my hands on as many books as I could get hold of and started reading up on it, started making links on social media, and also joined my theatre group, Spectrum Theatre, which I'll speak a bit more about later.
And that's, you know, the thing is that if we, well, I really do hope that we have a lot of neurotypical or non-autistic people listening to the podcast, and they may listen to you, you know, with me saying, and I had to go to bed for 2, you know, you say it quite in a deadpan way. "Oh yes, I had to go to bed for 2 weeks in order to process it." And, you know, non-autistic people would think, "You went to bed 2 weeks to process."
Well, no, it wasn't literally.
Why?
I bed all the time, but I just felt extremely tired.
But even so, I know what you mean, because my mum was ill as well. She was in hospital, and then it was the run up to the diagnosis and afterwards. And I was poleaxed on my sofa, watching horror films, knitting and eating ice cream. And it was literally for a week for me, because it's such a big thing to process. Wasn't it? So thank you very much for telling me that. And you know, I suppose really it's just that last bit, you know, what do you think now that, you know, after you got processed, you know, how does it sit with you now that you're, you know, you're a happy autist? You know, how do you feel?
Well, yeah, I feel pretty positive about it, but I still haven't told everybody. My family and my close friends are all fine with it, but at work, unless I have a connection with like an autistic student that I'm working with, who I might mention it, and generally at work I don't mention it, because I think there's still quite a lot of stigma around any professional. I'm sure you'll realise this, Sally. Maybe some people who come to you who don't know you're autistic, they might not think you're going to do such a good job. They might think you lack empathy or something, which is ridiculous, as we know.
It is, and I do get what you're saying from where you're coming from. I do understand that completely. But what I did is, as soon as I was diagnosed and got my diagnosis, I came out immediately. I changed all my website, all my directories, and then I went niche straight away. So I wanted to see neurodivergent clients, and I wanted to say, "I'm neurodivergent and I can help you. We're on a similar journey." But what was happening is I was seeing people who didn't know they were. So I was helping them. And I was saying, I cannot assess or diagnose. That's not for me to do. That's for psychologists. But I can observe. And if I see a number of different behaviours and things you're saying, or your history, experience, we'll have a chat about it, and I'll send you resources. So it depends, but I can see why you might decide not to do that, and it's each to their own, and anyone can self-diagnose.
Yeah, well, I'm getting there with coming out, and just like being LGBT, I didn't come out as gay straight away when I realised I was. That took years to fully come out.
Did it? And so you will take it in the time you need, and it's completely right. Completely right for you. So I love hearing a little bit about people's personal histories, you know, and I could talk to you for hours on this because I'm a bit of an anthropology, sort of paleoanthropologist. I just love humans and behaviour and everything else. So I'd love it if you, Madge, can just tell me a little bit about, you know, what was it like for you growing up, you know, primary, middle, secondary school, and then college and university. It's really sort of about your learning abilities and struggles with education generally, and we'll talk a bit more about it as far as mental health later on. But you tell me what you want to tell me about education.
Well, I was a very odd child. I think if I was at school now, I'd be diagnosed at age 5 without a doubt, because as soon as from starting school, I didn't play with other children. I was on my own in the playground. I preferred to make up imaginary friends, and just the whole sensory hell of the playground, the noise, and the fact that everybody played running around games. And I've got 2 left feet and can't catch a ball, so that immediately puts me at a disadvantage for playing games with other children. So I preferred to be on my own. So it wasn't until sort of late primary school that I began to really make any friends, and then there was secondary school. I was very lucky at secondary school because I was at a school with a special music programme, which I auditioned for at age 11, and I got on that, which meant that I had piano and clarinet tuition. I was in the choir and the wind band and had musicianship classes. So I got taken out of regular classes to do all that, and that was my special interest. So that was brilliant for any autistic person to be able to do this.
Yeah, in that bit, this is my ADHD mind. When you say something really interesting, I just pop in if that's okay, because I'm really fascinated with what you're saying. And I mean, isn't that such a wonderful thing? Because, you know, to be taken out and to be able to really immerse yourself in your total passion. I'm not sure if they would have been able to do that with me, because I was really into albatrosses and, and Lego, and there was nothing like that for me. And I was just getting into trouble and bulldozing into people's groups and saying the wrong thing and getting bullied. It was horrendous. But it would have been so wonderful to have had somebody who noticed the things about me. Drama was mine, I guess, a little bit. But I love the fact that you were given that opportunity so that you could, you know, really sort of be in the choir and be with your music, and then that carried on. So after secondary school, what happened with college and university, Madge?
Well, I went on to Cambridge to do a music degree, and I should have said earlier that for a lot of my childhood, I was what would now be called selectively mute. I was a very, very quiet child. I would go sometimes whole days at school where I would only answer my name in the register, and that's about all I would say. And it wasn't so much anxiety as just that I didn't have anything to say to the other kids because I didn't have anything in common with them. So, but by the time I got to uni, I was sort of talking a bit more, and I still didn't really make close friendships, but I did at least have acquaintances at uni. And I went to Cambridge and I got this organ scholarship, which obviously was brilliant, a fantastic opportunity. So again, I threw myself into my music, and I had all that to do. So that kind of covered up the fact that my social life was basically a disaster.
It is really interesting about selective mutism, and people have touched on it. I think it's the first time I've had a guest who's spoken about it, and the reason I Jump is such a wonderful.
It is, yeah. Amazing.
I listened to it on an audio because I'm better with audio, funnily enough, because I've got auditory processing issues. But I love that to understand, and I'm trying to learn more about it, because just because somebody doesn't speak, it doesn't mean to say that they haven't got a lot to say, but not everything needs to be with words.
There's so many other ways to communicate, and I hope that as time goes by, people will accept that, and that you'll be able to communicate with iPads or with drawing or with any other way. But I do understand what you're saying, not wanting to speak because you don't have anything in common with the other person and you don't feel like you've got anything to say. Totally get that.
Yeah, and I always loved writing, so reading and writing came very naturally to me. I'd say I'm probably hyperlexic, so I basically taught myself to read before I started school. So once I got there, it was fairly easy, and writing has always come more easily to me than speaking anyway. So I used to write reams and reams as a child. I wrote diaries and stories and all sorts, so I communicated that way more than in spoken word.
And I love that. I love that very much. I used to carry around a little typewriter. I used to take up to plane. I didn't know that was an autistic thing. So I love writing and I love diarising, and I bullet journal now, and I do understand that. And we're going to come on to drama because, you know, you've gone from non-verbal and then you've got your lovely theatre group. We're going to come on to that. And so you come out of university, and I'm going to ask you a question. You can talk about your mental health in a moment, and please, if you would. And many of us, we can find it hard hearing praise and criticism. I know I can, imposter syndrome, all that sort of thing. What would you say has been, you know, some of your biggest achievements, which you can feel proud about?
Well, I was talking with my wife about this the other day, and she was saying that it's more about feeling gratitude. That's how she feels. So things that we're grateful for rather than what we're proud of. And that rings true for me as well. So yeah, I feel very grateful I had the opportunity to go to Cambridge and be an organ scholar. That was an incredible opportunity. And quite recently, a few years ago, I started doing my own songwriting, and I've released an album and an EP of songs that I've written, although that's kind of dried up in the last 2 years. It was kind of something I went frantically at for a few years and then kind of dried up. But I'm very proud that I'm very grateful that I had an opportunity to record an album and an EP.
Well, let's see if we can put a rocket up that then, because we definitely put the links in the show.
Yeah, we share the links.
And, you know, this community, and the whole point about the podcast actually is to give other people a platform to share what they do, because so many people are interested in listening to the podcast, and, you know, and they want to know more about the people that are on there. And I think that's absolutely wonderful. And I'm just having a look. Oh yeah, I'll come through to that about music as well. So that is fantastic. And so anything else? Have you got anything else, any other achievements that you're grateful for?
Not just the fact I've managed to run my own business for so long. I never thought when I started it in my 20s that I'd still be teaching now at 50 and still got a waiting list of people who want lessons. So I'm overbooked.
And that is brilliant and well done, you know, and I don't mean that in a funny way. That it is difficult, but I do think us lot, we do like working for ourselves. I don't know why I spent so many years trying to people please and boss please and everything else, when I really should have just been taking, you know, notice of my gut feel and working for myself so that I could be responsible for my mistakes and learn from them, and I didn't have people telling me off. So
yeah,
I understand that, you know, there were 2 times in your life, Madge, when, you know, you did have particular mental health challenges. Please, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the first one was in my teens. When I was 12, my parents split up. It was all amicable enough, but when my sister and I didn't know at all that it was coming. It was just one day my dad announced that he was moving out, and we didn't even know that they'd had arguments or anything. So that was a bit of a shock. And at first I was just curious to see how this would pan out, and I thought it was a bit cool because a lot of the cool kids had divorced parents. So,
yeah.
But then sort of a year or so down the line, my mum was pretty unhappy. She was all on her own. And also around this time, I was starting to get bullied at school quite a lot. I was called weird handicap freak on a daily basis, and it was just verbal bullying, but that sort of thing does get
emotional abuse is just as hard as getting smacked in the face. Absolutely. Oh, you poor thing, that must have been so tough for you. How did you handle that? One should realize that maybe it's not as cool as you thought it was. What sort of stuff was happening after that?
So yeah, I had this other people calling me names every day, sort of thing, and I did try and throw myself into my schoolwork, but then I started developing an eating disorder. I did have mild anorexia all through my teens, but it was never actually diagnosed by a professional. So I basically just slowly got better, and I never ended up in hospital on a drip or anything like that. Thank goodness. Yeah. But it could have gone one of two ways, and luckily it went upwards, and I did get better. But it wasn't an easy time.
And there's some really fascinating research about autism and anorexia, and how girls really mask their eating disorders when they're young. But then when the hormones kick in, and when they're much more aware and they become teenagers, and it can be quite late, up to sort of 16, they can't mask it anymore, and then because they can't mask it anymore, because they're starving themselves, they're getting ill with the anorexia, then the mental health kicks in, and it becomes a massive problem. And
I know it's really
pathologized. And sometimes these poor girls, they go into hospital and they're just treating not eating. They're not understanding that it's to do with autism as well. What do you think about that, Madge?
Yeah, I think it's a real tragedy, and so I'm lucky I didn't end up like that. But it's good that there are more things now being found out, the links between autism and eating disorders, because before people didn't know.
No, they didn't, and I really hope so, especially in some of the residential and medical institutions, so that, because an autistic person put into strip lights with lots of people, loads of noises, people prodding you, trying to put tubes down your throat. I mean, that's just absolutely terrible. Awful. And then again, a bit later on in your life, Madge, you were struggling again. What happened then?
So just a couple of years ago, when COVID hit, obviously that hit everybody. It was pretty traumatic for everybody. But at the same time, I was going through menopause, and I had an early menopause because of a medical condition that I have. That means I have to have injections, which meant my menopause came slightly earlier than it would have done, with all the side effects like the hot flushes and insomnia and all those horrible sorts of things. So that, plus all the changes due to COVID, and because I'm sort of with autistic black and white thinking, I thought, we're all doomed when COVID first hit, and didn't know how that was going to pan out. And so all that got a bit much, and I'd say it was just mild depression and anxiety. I kind of lost interest in things around that time, and I'm slowly getting it back now, I think.
And you're making a really good point, actually, and I think this might be something you could contribute to at a later date. I don't know whether non-autistic people, or just even generally, the menopause is such a benchmark, it's such a watershed, it's such a change in a woman, and perhaps when we're autistic as well, and if we're ADHD, we have problems with estrogen, and it was incredibly hard. I found it hard. I could not bear the hot flushes. So if you imagine sensory issues with a hot flush, I actually think for me, it was horrific, because I couldn't bear the feeling of suddenly going all hot and sweaty. I just hated it. Did you have that?
Yeah. And it was more the insomnia, I think, and the heightened sensory issues. And I often find just around the house, just when my wife's doing the washing up or banging about in the kitchen, I'm like, I have to put my hands in my ears. And I did that that didn't happen before menopause.
Absolutely. I think much more should be written about that. I haven't seen an awful lot. I know there's quite a lot in America, but yeah, thank you very much for bringing that up. That's definitely something that we would talk more about. And so just tell me a little bit about your wonderful work as a music teacher, you know, and a bit about how it was affected during COVID. But it is your passion, it's your life. You know, please just give us a lovely story, your journey as a music teacher.
Well, I'll tell you one of the loveliest stories about my work. It's someone who I worked with for several years, an autistic boy who came to me aged 9, and 3 other teachers had already rejected him because of the way he learned. He learned entirely by ear, had perfect pitch, which I don't have, by the way. I have good relative pitch, but not perfect. Yeah. So, and this boy, he hardly spoke when he came to me, but he felt comfortable with me, stayed with me until he was 21, I think, and then he went on to do music at uni. So I taught him for about 12 years. I also taught one of his friends for a few years, also autistic, who went on to the same uni. And just the difference I made in those boys' lives just warms my heart to think that I could do that for people.
It is so wonderful, and I absolutely do get that. And I have you know, one of my past clients, I mean, not being sort of confidential or anything, but it's on a similar thing about you know, lovely family set up, you know, loves her mum, all this kind of stuff, but it was a tap teacher when she was a child. And that person took her completely out of herself, gave her so much confidence, showed her how to be better and just do what she wanted to do. And I think it's really wonderful what you did for that person, that they've gone on to college and it's because of you. And that'll happen again. You know, you've got, you know, you're saying you're 50. Well, there's a good 20, 30, 40 years ahead of you, Madge. Don't forget.
I don't know about that. I think I will need to retire in about 10 years' time or something.
Well, we never know if we can afford it with the way economy's going, but that's a lovely story. And you know, I haven't given you this question, but if you don't mind me asking, you know, you all through your life you've been involved in music. Can I just ask you, do you still love playing the piano or the organ for pleasure?
Well, I still play the organ for services a couple of times a month, and not so much for pleasure now. Unfortunately, I think working with it has taken out a bit of the pleasure, and I still do sometimes, but really not as much as I should, and certainly not as much as I used to.
I can understand that. My friend's an art therapist for you know, mental health challenged adults, and she used to do such lovely art. And I think I asked her that question, you know, do you ever paint for pleasure? And she doesn't have time because she's so embroiled in it, but it is really wonderful work that you do. Just a little thing, because I'm really interested in yours, but if you don't mind, I just want to share my experience as well, because we've got something that's very similar and in common. So you know, years ago, in my school days, I used to love to mimic and to improvise. And I actually used to impersonate the impersonators, people like Stanley Baxter and Michael Howard, Les Dawson, you know, fun, really funny like that. And so I did lots of drama at school and then college. And then it was left for sort of, oh my goodness, 40 odd years, I don't know, a long time. And 17 years ago, I joined a local community drama group. And it was a production called the 12 Days of Christmas, covering social issues in Crawley, where we live at the moment. And my part was, it was a bit of a Peggy Mitchell character. And I had to stand up on a plinth in the round and do a 2-minute monologue, which was absolutely terrifying. It got harder for each production, but I felt quite proud that I did it, because you know, it was really, really good fun. And but I understand that you're part of a community theatre group. Please tell me more about your group and what you've done.
Yeah, so the group I'm in is Spectrum Theatre Sheffield. We're a theatre group for autistic people and others. So there's about just over half of us are probably autistic, and then there's other people who are parents or friends of the director who's neurotypical. We're about 40 of us normally, 30 to 40 people, although obviously with COVID it's gone a bit out of the window and we've been chatting on Zoom and we haven't really been doing rehearsals like we were. But I joined shortly after I got diagnosed, so that was 2017 I joined. And we've done, for 3 Christmases, we did big shows every Christmas. We did a version of A Christmas Carol. It was set in the modern day in Sheffield that our director wrote for us. And he's brilliant at writing shows and writing music for them. And we have our signature show, which is called In Someone Else's Shoes, which we've performed several times. And that's about the experience of being autistic, which was written in conjunction with all the cast. And one of our future projects is to write Someone Else's Shoes too, which is specifically about autistic adults as opposed to children.
That's fantastic, and I will remind at the end. But if it's on YouTube or if there's any links, so if anyone in the area can go and see it, I'll ask you to put that in the links, because that sounds absolutely wonderful. And that's a big group, 40.
Yeah, it's an amazing group to be a part of.
Being autistic or neurodivergent, wonderful. I love that. So I know you were saying earlier about writing music and your album and your EP, that's an old-fashioned word, isn't it? And one of the things you do is write theme tunes. And I'd like to ask you about Heather Peace. And the reason I know her is because she played one of the teachers and became a lesbian character within Waterloo Road. And actually my eldest son absolutely loves Waterloo Road and he watches it on a loop. And Heather, she was recently in an audio play, So Crocodile, which was written by Samantha Grierson, who's another guest on the podcast, a director and writer of audio plays, and they're all so brilliant. But you really love Heather Peace. So just tell me a little bit about your relationship with Heather.
Well, I've been a fan of Heather since she was in Lip Service, which is a lesbian drama that was on BBC Three about 10 years ago now. And then I found out that Heather wrote music and I got really into her music. Saw her live in Sheffield. It was about 2013 I first saw her live, and I've seen her at least 20 times since then. So I'm a big fan, yeah.
And what sort of music, is she the singer? What sort of music?
Yeah, she writes her own songs, so singer-songwriter.
And what sort of genre is she?
Just sort of, she's influenced a lot by 70s, 80s pop, I would say, the sort of stuff I grew up with, because we're around the same age.
80s. Yeah. And I don't know about you. Are you Generation X? I am.
Yeah, I suppose you'd call it Generation. Yeah.
We're the coolest. Sorry, but we are. My husband's a Generation X. I love it. Oh,
yes. So I'm part of Heather's fan club, and we have fan club conventions every year in Brighton, or we did before COVID. That's where Heather lives, down in Brighton. So we sort of get to hang out with her in the pub, and then she does a gig for us. And people come from all over the world for these conventions. We've had people coming from America and Australia, and she's got some fans in far-flung places.
I know, it's wonderful, but you did something very special, didn't you?
Yeah, the amazing thing,
what did you do?
The first time I went to one of these, we're just hanging out with Heather in the pub on the night before she was doing her gig, and I told her that I'd written a song for her baby daughter that had just been born. Well, I'd sent her the song a few weeks before, and I said I'd love to play it at the gig, and she said, "Oh, why don't you be my support act and play 3 of your songs?" So that was incredible, being a support act to one of my idols. And
what an achievement! When I was asking you earlier about your achievements, that's a big match. That's so fabulous. I mean, can you imagine that? It's like I don't know what it's like. It's like going to the Brit Awards, and then somebody mentioning the Titanic, and then somebody saying, "Oh, there's somebody in the audience whose great grandfather did something," and all of a sudden I'm up at the Brit Awards. Now, I think that's absolutely wonderful, Madge, and it's so lovely to have a fan club, and I don't know if I've got a fan club. Who would it be for?
I'll be in your fan club, Sally.
Oh, thank you. But I think that's absolutely lovely.
Yeah, can I go on to talk about how I wrote a theme song for Samantha Grierson's audio play?
Yes, I would love you to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I first listened to Sam's plays when she brought out Hempire, starring Heather Peace, in which Heather plays an autistic character called Drax, and that was the first one of her plays that I listened to, and I thought, wow, this is somebody who's representing me, and the representation was amazing. And then she went on to write Crocodile, also starring Heather as an autistic character. So this was like, wow, Heather plus autism. That's two things to do with me. I love this representation. So I got in touch with Sam, we got chatting, and we became friends online over lockdown. And I got to meet her in person last year as well. We hung out in Stratford-on-Avon, and I met her gorgeous puppy Doogie.
Yes, what a lovely dog. And actually, Sam is going to train, I think she's training Doogie as a service dog, and that's right. I hope that happens. And she is lovely, and I really hope I am starting to meet some of my podcast guests. In fact, I'm meeting one on the February in Brighton. I'm meeting another one at a Lego convention. So you never know, if I'm up around your neck of the woods, I'll meet you too. So the theme tune for Samantha, and so I'm going to have to re-listen just so I can hear your theme tune.
Yeah, so the play's called How to Drop a Piano, so that's obviously ready-made for a piano theme tune.
And we love that because Madge who played...
that's right, Madge was on the podcast as well, weren't they?
And Samantha as well. So we're all in it together. We're creating a lovely, wonderful family, and helping each other. So I love that. So you're married to Joe. And I just wanted to ask you, what do you do together as a couple in order to keep mentally and physically healthy, really, and also a bit about both of you being autistic. How does that work as far as being, say, you're autistic, you're same sex, and you're married? Tell me about that. All of that.
Yeah, so it works pretty well generally. I mean, we've been together 21 years now. Just been married for 4 years. We didn't think we were the marrying type initially, but then we realised we weren't getting any younger and we weren't going anywhere, so we thought we might as well tie the knot. And so things we do to look after our mental health. We like going for walks. We're very lucky we live near the Peak District in Derbyshire. And so we get out there when we can. We've got a lot of lovely parks near us in Sheffield. And we both share very similar values. We're both vegans. I was a vegan, and then Joe became vegan when we met.
And that's wonderful. And well, you'd be proud of me then, because as much as I'm not. I'm a bit carnivorous as well. But last night I put my hand to making a tucker dal, and I have to say it was rather scrummy. And they weren't the tiny little bird's eye chilies. They were the green finger chilies, which are perfect. So it had a bite to it. But I really want to work a lot more with dals and aubergines and other things that to keep me off the meat. So I mean, that is very good, not just for your health, but for the planet as well. And walking, you don't have to tell me about that. I mean, I'm hoping to move to Somerset, and we'll have the Mendip Hills. I love walking in nature. And one thing, because I broke both my ankles in 2020, which wasn't terribly fun, so I've got to be a bit careful. But hill walking, and you're talking about the Peak District, hill walking is just fantastic, because the reward is A, getting to the top and seeing what a fantastic view, and then B, getting to walk back down again. How do you think about that?
Yeah, it's wonderful. Very lucky to have so many lovely hills nearby.
Oh, it is. And you'll add a few years onto your life just for getting out in nature, getting that lovely oxygen inside you, and being with somebody you love.
Yeah, that's right. Very lucky.
21 years. That's a really long relationship. I've got my 25th next year. Not sure what I'm going to do for that. We're terrible. We keep forgetting our anniversaries, but hey ho. So I've seen this lovely photo, and I haven't gone into detail about it, so you're going to tell me about it now, please. I saw a lovely photo of you at a cat cafe, and I'm always posting about our cat Willow. We call her Willow the Decapitator because she brings in various creatures, and I can't put a bell on her because she's autistic and she would not like a bell ringing by her ear, so I'm not going to do that. I just have to kind of try and save as many of these creatures as I can. So tell me about the cat cafe. It looks fab.
Yeah, it was just down the road from us in Sheffield, and we don't have any animals living with us anymore, unfortunately. And I did have cats before Joe moved in with me, but Joe is not a cat fan for the very reason that you were saying about Willow. She just does not like what they do to birds. Yes. So I understand that. So we compromised and got guinea pigs, but our last guinea pig died last year, sadly. We're thinking about getting a dog sometime, but they take up so much time that we need to...
And they're very dependent, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we're waiting till one or both of us is retired, really, to get a dog, I think. But so in the meantime, we do things like go to the cat cafe, or I do. Joe wouldn't be too bothered about it, but this cafe has about 10 cats that just wander around while you're sat with your coffee and cake, and they come up to you and you can stroke them, and yeah, it's lovely.
And which is your favourite cat?
Oh, I don't know. I've got a favourite. I love them all.
It is lovely. I'm on TikTok. I love TikTok, and of course I watch all the crazy cat videos all the time. And I'm not keen on the serval mix cat, I have to say, because I think they should be on the African savannah. But I do love I love it when you see dogs and cats together and the wonderful relationship that they can have together. So maybe I'll think about it. But I have a bit of a sensory problem with dogs, because I'm very olfactory, sensory, that's, smell. And I just can't bear the smell of dogs.
Yeah, they do smell when they're wet, don't they?
Yeah, and when they get a bit older, I can live with that a little bit, but it's the dog poop. I can cope with cat poop, but I can't cope with dog poop. So it's a bit of a problem with me. I'm picking it up. Anyway, we'll go past that one, but the cat cafe sounds absolutely lovely.
Yeah.
So there's a new book due for release on the 21st of April called Learning from Autistic Teachers, and please put the link on it in the show notes. And I understand that you contributed to that. Can you tell us a bit about it? It looks really fascinating. I've had a quick look on Amazon with quite a lot of contributors covering lots of different areas, and education is so important. Tell me a bit about your contribution and more about the book, Madge.
Yeah, so the book's called Learning from Autistic Teachers, How to be a Neurodiversity Friendly School. And each chapter is written by a different autistic teacher. And this is really busting stereotypes, because lots of people think that we can't be teachers or that we can't be good
Rubbish!
Yeah, I agree. and my chapter is called Life on the Margins, a Peripatetic Perspective. So it's about my peripatetic music teaching in schools, and also being LGBT and autistic. So very much on the margins.
And that is fantastic. And you just said a lovely word there, which I'll probably have difficulty with because it sounds like another word that I can't pronounce. Peripatetic.
It just means visiting. It just means visiting, basically. It's a posh word for somebody who goes around different schools.
Oh, right. Okay, that's interesting. So how can I use that in a sentence? Not being a teacher, but how could I be peripatetic?
I've not really heard it used in other contexts. It's mainly to do with teachers or
Okay. Well, I'm going to look that one up afterwards because I love words.
Yeah.
And I'm a bit of a malaprop. I'm a bit like Ethel from old EastEnders, and or is it Dot? I don't know. I'm good at the old malaprop, I have to say. So when is it April? When's it being?
Yeah, it's April. It comes out. That's right.
Very exciting. And so again, please, there is a link. If you wouldn't mind putting, I'll ask you for your links afterwards. If you put that on, people can read about it on Amazon. And very, very important. I see teachers as clients, and I love that there are more autistic teachers. And the wonderful Amy Richards, her Square Ped podcast, and who puts my podcast together, used to be a teacher. And you know, it's a hard enough job as it is with bureaucracy, which sometimes we're not very good at, and organising and various different things like that. So very worthwhile, you know, so pop that in. Now, this is a really big question, but we've got plenty of time, and I'd like you to take your time in answering this question, please, because you are a teacher and education is so important. And the whole of society. So here we go. How would you like to see positive change at home, at school, and in the workplace to help all neurodivergent people be included and respected as valuable members of society?
Well, I'd say the main thing is to look at our strengths rather than our deficits, because the medical model of autism is so much built up on our deficits and what we can't do. And even just the words people use, like autism spectrum disorder or attention deficit disorder, it's horrible. It's based on that's basing it on our things we can't do. I want people to look at what we can do, which is lots of things, obviously. And I think it's such a tragedy for when somebody gets diagnosed and their parents are told, oh, so-and-so's autistic, and the parent goes, oh, what a tragedy, my child will never amount to anything. Yeah. And we need to change the narrative around that. So that's why things like this book that's coming out is so important, I think.
It is. It really, really is. And actually, I'm talking to Tigger Pritchard and David Gray Hammond, and they're very, very much into this. And it's because I'm quite a newbie, I'm really feeling this a lot. I can't stand all the pathologizing, the clinical, the medicalization of it, the things about like spectrum 10 and cures and all this stuff. I want to see a world where we don't even have terms. We don't have any terms at all. And that people aren't pointing at us. You know, people need to be around us, make friends with us, understand that there is a neuro tribe. We are different, a lot of us are, but for 56 years nobody knew I was autistic and ADHD. They just called me Mad Sally. Okay, well, you can call me that if you like, or you can just respect me a little bit more and understand that I have a different neurotype, and so that people can accommodate and work harder. We've got a long way to go, haven't we, Madge?
Yeah, and I'd like the route towards adult diagnosis to be easier, and there shouldn't be these ridiculously long waiting times. There shouldn't be barriers to going through a GP. And when I went for my diagnosis, the last question that she asked me, she said, I can only give you the diagnosis if you can say that autism has significantly impaired your life. And I thought, excuse me, you just told me I'm autistic. Whether or not it's impaired my life shouldn't make a difference to getting the diagnosis. So I said, yes, it had impaired my life, but it has also significantly enhanced it. It's worked both ways. So that question it should not be in the assessment criteria.
No, well, there's lots that shouldn't either.
Yeah, it's like putting the cart before the horse, because yes, it does impair our life, but the diagnosis should come first, and the impairments are things that are created by living in a neurotypical world.
I agree, and people need to understand a lot more. It's like people say we don't have empathy. We don't understand metaphor, which we absolutely do. Loads of us love language, and loads of us love jokes. I mean, I don't get jokes very much, but I love like telling them. And you know, I totally get what you're saying. That a lot needs to change, but I think, you know, I prefer not to be very activisty and shouting and screaming about it. I quite like to, you know, just say, look, here I am. If you want to know more about it, get lots of lovely guests onto a podcast. They can share their different experiences. People like your good self, Madge.
Oh, it's brilliant what you're doing, Sally. So keep up the good work.
I know. Thank you so much. And I am very, very grateful for you to come on board. And you know, I love everything that you do. Let's work together. You know, we're all holding hands, running down a big hill like Little House on the Prairie, with the music going in the background, and where's one of us falling over and getting up and laughing our heads off. Imagine that. We've got that wonderful image in our heads now. So, Madge, thank you so much for our wonderful time together. We'll have the links put on at the bottom, and I'm following you on social media because I think you're wonderful. And have a great 2022, and enjoy the Cat Cafe.
Oh, thanks very much, Sally. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye, Madge. Thank you so much.
So you want me to send you the links? What do you want?
Yeah, I'm going to email you. It's all going to go on the notes. Thank you so much. All the best, Madge.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for listening to the Neurodivergence and Mental Health podcast. Links and resources will be at the end in the show notes. I very much look forward to meeting you again. Thanks for listening. Bye.